Have you ever found yourself disagreeing with someone's idea, only to suddenly find yourself in a position of having to defend whether you're a good person or not? That the conversation has shifted from the idea itself to what kind of person you are for disagreeing with the idea. This is a subtle shift, and it's an important one because it actually happens a lot. In this video, I want to talk about how ideas can be framed to influence us. To give you an example of this, recently I was involved in a group, and one person presented an idea to the group. And first off, they didn't present it so much as their idea, but that this was the right thing to do. And it was also clear that this person would feel, personally hurt if people didn't go along with their idea, that it would mean that people didn't care about them as a person. Now, as it turned out, I didn't agree with the idea. I thought it was solving a problem that didn't actually exist, and that it was also going to be an imposition on others. So I kind of stated why I didn't think it was a good idea. And what was interesting is that people didn't respond to the points I'd raised. They judged me as a person. Oh, you mustn't be a caring person. They didn't talk about, the points or the idea itself anymore. It became like, oh, if you were a caring person, you'd go along with this. And this was very kind of tricky to navigate because this person did feel hurt that I didn't agree with their idea. And, I do care about them. And so that was a difficult position to be in. But they linked the idea with their own identity so that me disagreeing with the idea meant that I was rejecting them. And so that was tricky. But another thing that was interesting was on the larger scale of the group, I talked to quite a few people and I knew they didn't like the idea. They didn't agree with it. They didn't think it was necessary. But once it got framed that this person would be hurt by this idea, by the rejection of the idea, that made them feel uncomfortable. Once it was framed that to not go along with this idea meant you weren't a caring person, they didn't want to be in that position of being seen as an uncaring person. So many people went along with the idea who actually didn't agree with the idea. And this is a way that how things can be framed can influence us. And once it took me a while to actually figure this out, to kind of parse it out and see what the dynamics were, what was going on. But once I did, I started to see it more and more, that a lot of people don't present something as their idea. They present it as, well, this is the fair thing to do. This is the compassionate thing to do. This is the smart thing to do. And then you're in the position of, appearing not smart or not compassionate if you disagree with them. And it also overlooks the fact whether that idea is intrinsically linked to smartness or to being compassionate, or if there are other ways to approach that. So this is called moral framing, when you link an idea with a virtue, and then to disagree with the idea means that you don't have that virtue. And this is a very interesting thing, and it's one that happens intentionally on a political level or through media or corporations. They think this through about how this influence can be applied. But for most of us, I think it happens more unconsciously. In the example I gave, I don't think that person was trying to intentionally and consciously influence people, but it was a pattern of communication that they learned in their life from childhood growing up. So I want to give you a few more examples of how this framing can influence us. So somebody might say to you, you have good taste, you'll appreciate this. So if you don't appreciate it, it's kind of a sign that you don't have good taste. Or you're a sophisticated person, you'll get this. It's like, oh, well, how does that really work? And I had a conversation recently where somebody made a strong point, so that I, as it turned out again, I didn't agree with. And so I raised my counterpoints. And instead of, again, addressing the points I'd made, they said, oh, I guess you're not as open-minded as I thought you were. So notice that shift from the topic itself to character. And this is a sign to notice that this is happening, that there's a shift away from the idea itself to what kind of person you are for disagreeing as a way to influence you back to get to it. And this can be effective. If somebody always says, oh, you're not open-minded, you might go, you want to prove you're open-minded. Here's a more humorous example. Somebody might say to you, oh, you're an adventurous person, you like challenges, let's go heli skiing. Well, first it's kind of appeal to your vanity, like you're an adventurous person. And then going along with the idea is your way to prove you're adventurous. And not going along means you're not adventurous. And if this is one-on-one, that might be kind of easy to negotiate or figure out. But if there's a group of people that are saying that this is the adventurous thing to do, you might feel like, well, I got to prove that I'm an adventurous person or I'm a good sport. And we see this in teenagers all the time. Come on, you're chicken. And a group of friends say you're chicken if you don't do this. You kind of have to prove your bravery or prove that you got some oomph by going along with something that you really don't want to do. And so that's how conformity works. And this also, as I said, with groups, it gets a little bit more complicated when an idea gets linked with a virtue. So real patriots support this. If that idea gets linked to that with enough people, you risk appearing unpatriotic. You might be very patriotic, but you don't agree with the idea, but now it's linked. You disagreeing with this idea, with this policy, means you're unpatriotic. Or real Christians believe this. Real Christians vote this way on this issue. Well, especially if you're in a community, if you have a difference of agreement, then you risk other people thinking you're not a Christian, maybe even booting you out of the tribe. That happens all the time. So what complicates this even further is sometimes there is a genuine connection between an idea or a behavior or a policy and a value. But just saying there is doesn't mean there is. And it doesn't mean that that's the only way that having that virtue or the value can be, demonstrated, or what even the best idea in the situation is. I just want to leave you with that idea of noticing when a conversation is shifted from evaluating the idea to evaluating somebody as a person. Instead of examining the evidence, the merits of the idea, it becomes, what kind of person are you to disagree with this idea? Or if you were a certain kind of person, you would agree with this. So we can just notice that. We can pause, slow down, and just notice if we've gone off topic, if we've drifted into this, what kind of person am I, as opposed to the thing itself. And we can look at if there's been evidence offered or if we're just being pressured. So I've kind of thrown a bunch of stuff at you, and it might seem a little bit complicated to think about moral framing or identity framing and all this, but on one hand, it can be simpler, because we can feel that kind of pressure to conform or to agree, or a discomfort in saying no before we even understand the dynamics or all the facts and the things. So as an embodiment coach, one thing I've noticed is the more centered we are, the more grounded we are in ourselves, the more connected we are to our feelings, then we can be aware of that pressure. And we can stay more centered in ourselves. Because we've all noticed this. We've all, been with a salesman who's, it all sounds really good, but we have this niggling feeling like maybe it's not as good a deal as we, think it is. Or there's that person that seems really nice and charming, but your gut instinct is saying, be cautious around this person. Don't trust them. And the more centered and grounded we are, the more we can kind of take in that information, because a lot of our processing of situations happens unconsciously. And one way we can kind of be receptive to that understanding is by being aware of our bodies. Our bodies can let us know, we can kind of have that clenching in the gut, be careful here, or maybe this isn't a good idea, or maybe somebody's pressuring me beyond, just that they're pressuring me. So I hope this has given you a few things to think about. The other thing I want to say about embodiment practices is the more centered we are, the more capable we are of saying no and having the confidence to disagree. Because especially if it's presented as, you're not a good person if you disagree with this, you're not a patriot if you disagree, that can be a hard place to stand. So the more grounded we are in ourselves, the more we develop our own confidence, our own strength, then, we can be willing to say no, even though we'll be, judged for it. So I hope this video has given you some things to think about. If it has, please hit like or subscribe. It helps this channel grow. And I'd be interested in hearing your comments. Please comment below about, where you've seen this in your own life, or how you think this applies, or anything that at all that you, is generated from this discussion. All right, thank you.